The first-class cabin of Flight 2187 from Atlanta to San Francisco glowed with soft morning light. Dr. Nia Caldwell adjusted her neck pillow, the leather seat cool against her fingertips. She inhaled the aroma of freshly brewed coffee wafting through the cabin as she reviewed quarterly projections on her tablet. Tomorrow, she would present her fintech startup's groundbreaking payment platform to Silicon Valley's most influential investors. "Excuse me, ma'am." Nia looked up to see a flight attendant, mid-30s, blonde hair pulled tight, name tag reading Elliot, hovering above her with a clipboard. "Is something wrong?" Nia asked, her voice measured and professional. "I need to see your boarding pass." "Again," Elliot said, voice just loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. Nia reached for her designer handbag, extracting her phone to display the digital boarding pass. "Here you go. Seat 2A, as you can see." The attendant's eyes narrowed. "This doesn't look right. Are you sure you're in the correct seat?" A chill crept along Nia's spine despite the cabin's comfortable temperature. She'd experienced this before, the questioning tone, the implication that she didn't belong. But never so blatantly, and never while wearing the CEO credentials hanging from her neck. "I'm positive," Nia replied, voice firm but controlled. "I checked in online yesterday. I've been seated since pre-boarding began 30 minutes ago." 2 seats ahead, a white businessman in an expensive suit watched the exchange. Coffee paused midway to his lips. Across the aisle, an older woman with silver hair frowned, her magazine forgotten in her lap. "I'll need to verify this with my supervisor," Elliot said, disappearing toward the front galley. Nia took a deep breath. 10 years building her company. 8 successful funding rounds. 3 international expansion deals closed last quarter alone. Yet here she was, being questioned about her right to sit in a seat she'd paid for. Minutes later, Elliot returned with the lead flight attendant, a black woman in her 50s whose name tag read Marcia. "Dr. Caldwell, I apologize for the confusion," Marcia began, but Elliot interrupted. "The manifest shows a discrepancy," he insisted. "This passenger needs to move to the main cabin until we sort this out." Marcia's expression shifted subtly. "Elliot, I've checked the system. Dr. Caldwell it's protocol." Elliot cut in. "Security protocol." The cabin grew unnaturally quiet. The usual pre-flight rustling ceased as passengers tuned into the confrontation unfolding. "I've been a Diamond Medallion member for 6 years," Nia stated, pulling out her platinum card. "My seat was confirmed weeks ago. Ma'am, you need to gather your things now." Elliot's voice hardened. "We can't delay departure." Nia felt her heart rate accelerate. "I'm not moving from my assigned seat without cause." That's when it happened. Elliot gestured to 2 uniformed staff members who had materialized at the cabin entrance. "We need assistance with a non-compliant passenger." The sharp intake of breath from nearby passengers punctuated the absurdity of the moment. Nia Caldwell, who had delivered keynotes to thousands, negotiated 9-figure deals across boardroom tables, and been featured on the cover of Forbes, was being labeled non-compliant for sitting in her assigned seat. "This is completely unacceptable," Nia said, her voice steady despite the adrenaline surging through her veins. "I have every right to be seated here." The first security officer reached for her arm. "Ma'am, please come with us." The second security officer moved to her other side. "Don't make this difficult." Their fingers pressed into the silk of her blazer as they physically lifted her from the seat. Nia's tablet clattered to the floor, the screen cracking on impact. "Take your hands off me immediately," Nia demanded, her dignity under assault. "I have done nothing wrong." The businessman who had been watching stood up abruptly. "Wait a minute. What's happening here?" A murmur rippled through the cabin as Nia was forcibly moved toward the exit, her carry-on left behind. "She has a first-class ticket," called out the silver-haired woman, now standing. "I heard her say it." Victor Mensah, a distinguished Ghanaian-American venture capitalist and Nia's longtime mentor, rose from his seat in 3C. "This is outrageous. Stop this immediately." As Nia was pulled down the aisle, her CEO badge swinging from her neck, the atmosphere in the cabin transformed. Disbelief gave way to outrage. One by one, passengers began to stand. "I'm recording this," announced a young tech executive, smartphone held high. "She's the CEO of CalPay." "I recognize her from TechCrunch," shouted another passenger, the security Officers hesitated, suddenly aware of the growing resistance surrounding them. Nia locked eyes with a young black woman in the fifth row who looked horrified. In that moment, Nia thought of every barrier she'd smashed, every no she'd turned into a yes, every doubt she'd silenced with excellence. Have you ever witnessed someone being denied their rightful place despite every qualification? Have you felt that punch to the gut when you realize success doesn't shield you from prejudice? This isn't just Nia's story. This is about what happens when people decide they've seen enough injustice, and what unfolds when ordinary passengers transform into extraordinary allies. What no one on that plane could predict was how the next 7 minutes would not only empty an entire aircraft, but trigger a nationwide conversation about privilege, power, and the cost of staying silent. Dr. Nia Caldwell's journey to that first-class seat began 32 years earlier in Oakland, California, where her mother taught high school mathematics and her father managed a community credit union. Their modest three-bedroom home overflowed with books, lively debates about economic justice, and a fundamental belief that education could dismantle barriers. At dinner tables throughout her childhood, conversations about financial access never felt abstract. She witnessed her father helping families open their first bank accounts, explaining interest rates to bewildered immigrants, and advocating for those denied loans despite solid credit histories. Banking isn't complicated, her father would tell 10-year-old Nia as she helped him organize community workshops. It's the gatekeepers who make it seem that way. By 16, Nia could calculate compound interest faster than her calculator-wielding classmates. While her peers spent weekends at the mall, she interned at her father's credit union, noticing how different customers received dramatically different treatment. "Watch how they speak to Mrs. Chun compared to Mr. Davidson," her father whispered. During her first week, same income, same credit score, completely different experience. Nia graduated high school as valedictorian, earning a full scholarship to Stanford. Her freshman roommate, Zoe Richardson, daughter of a banking executive, became both her closest friend and her window into a world of privilege Nia had only glimpsed from afar. "You're coming to Aspen for winter break," Zoe announced during their sophomore year. "Dad's hosting a tech finance summit, and you know more about banking algorithms than half his colleagues." That winter break altered Nia's trajectory. While helping Zoe's father explain blockchain applications to curious executives, she met Diane Hoffman, the lone female partner at Redwood Ventures. "You understand both the human element and the technology," Diane noted, handing Nia her card. "Call me when you're ready to change the world." For years later, with dual degrees in computer science and economics, Nia did call, after 3 major banks rejected her innovative payment platform proposal. They said the concept was too ambitious, Nia explained during her interview with Redwood Ventures. "But what they meant was they couldn't envision someone like me disrupting their industry." Diane hired her immediately. Under her mentorship, Nia's understanding of financial systems expanded exponentially. She developed mobile banking solutions for overlooked markets, created fraud detection systems that reduced false positives by 62%, and pioneered user interfaces that democratized financial literacy. For 7 years, Nia ascended through Redwood's ranks, becoming their youngest director and earning industry accolades. Yet something nagged at her. The same platforms she built still primarily serve the already privileged. At 31, she resigned to found CalPay with a radical mission, creating financial tools specifically designed for underbanked communities, immigrant populations, and small business owners struggling with traditional banking relationships. The early days operated from her garage apartment, with Zoe Richardson as her first investor and operations director. Their initial product, a mobile payment system requiring no bank account or credit check, attracted immediate attention from both enthusiastic users and skeptical industry veterans. "This will never scale," declared Warren Mitchell, CEO of Pinnacle Financial, at a 2019 fintech conference where Nia presented preliminary results. "These customers aren't profitable enough to justify the infrastructure." Victor Mensa, then a legendary figure in venture capital known for backing overlooked founders, sat in the front row during Mitchell's dismissive commentary. After the panel, he approached Nia. "They said the same thing about microfinance in Bangladesh," Victor noted, his Ghanaian accent warm and measured. "Now it's a global movement that's lifted millions from poverty." Victor became more than an investor. He became Nia's strategic advisor, confidant, and shield against an industry that frequently questioned her legitimacy. When CalPay secured its series of funding, Victor hosted the celebration dinner. To the woman who reminded me why I became an investor, he toasted. Not to fund apps that deliver champagne to penthouse doors, but to back founders who remember that technology should serve humanity. By 2023, CalPay had grown from 3 employees to 78, with offices in Oakland, Atlanta, and Detroit. Their user base expanded beyond initial projections, with 5 million active accounts and transaction volume exceeding $2 billion annually. Nia's face appeared in business magazines. Industry panels sought her expertise, and competing financial institutions began copying CalPay's inclusive features. The flight to San Francisco represented CalPay's most pivotal moment yet. After years of bootstrap growth and strategic funding rounds, Nia was preparing to announce their Series D $180 million that would fuel international expansion and new product lines specifically designed for small business owners. The evening before boarding that fateful plane, Nia conducted a final preparation session with her executive team in CalPay's Atlanta office. Tomorrow changes everything, Nia explained, surveying the conference room where projection screens displayed their presentation deck. The Sun Valley Conference isn't just about securing this funding round. It's about positioning CalPay as the definitive alternative to extractive financial systems. Her chief technology officer, Raj Patel, adjusted his glasses. The demo needs to be flawless. Pinnacle Financial will have representatives there looking for any vulnerability. Let them look, Nia replied, confidence evident in her posture. 6 years ago, Warren Mitchell said we wouldn't last 6 months. Now his own daughter uses CalPay for her nonprofit work. Zoe Richardson, now CalPay's COO, tapped her pen against the polished table. Speaking of Pinnacle, Avery Sinclair confirmed her attendance. Front row, according to the seating chart. A momentary tension crossed Nia's expression. Avery Sinclair, Pinnacle's director of competitive intelligence, had emerged as CalPay's most persistent critic. Her calculated questions during industry panels, thinly veiled criticisms in financial publications, and talent poaching attempts had become increasingly aggressive as CalPay gained market share. Good, Nia responded after a measured pause. I want her to witness this firsthand. Later that night, as Nia packed her carry-on, her phone buzzed with a text from Victor Mensa. Confirmed our investor dinner reservation for tomorrow night. The tide is turning, Nia. After your presentation, they'll be lining up to back our vision. Morning arrived with a flurry of final preparations. Nia dressed methodically, charcoal suit, white silk blouse, the subtle CalPay logo pin on her lapel, and the sapphire earrings her parents had given her after the first successful funding round. Her hotel room overlooked Atlanta's skyline, the early sun casting long shadows across the financial district where traditional banks had once rejected her business plan at the airport. Nia noticed Avery Sinclair at the first-class check-in counter, tall, blonde, impeccably dressed in a cream-colored suit that probably cost more than Nia's first month's rent in Oakland. Their eyes met briefly across the terminal. Avery's plastic smile didn't reach her eyes. Dr. Caldwell, Avery acknowledged with practiced cordiality as they later crossed paths at the lounge entrance. Heading to Sun Valley, I presume? Miss Sinclair. Nia responded evenly. Yes, we're unveiling some exciting developments. How intriguing. Pinnacle has several announcements planned as well. Quite remarkable timing. The implication hung in the air, Pinnacle preparing to overshadow CalPay's moment with their own corporate muscle. Nia recognized the tactic for what it was, intimidation wrapped in professional courtesy. I look forward to seeing them, Nia replied, maintaining eye contact. Innovation benefits from diverse approaches. Avery's smile tightened imperceptibly. Indeed, though sustainability matters more than novelty, wouldn't you agree? Not every startup survives the scaling phase. Before Nia could respond, Victor Mensa appeared beside her, his imposing 6'4" frame and distinguished gray temples commanding immediate presence. Ah, Ms. Sinclair from Pinnacle, Victor stated, extending his hand. I believe we met at the Frankfurt Financial Summit last fall. Your presentation on legacy banking adaptations was informative, if somewhat conventional. Avery's composure flickered momentarily. Mr. Mensah, always a pleasure. If you'll excuse me, my colleague is saving me a seat. As she departed, Victor turned to Nia. That woman has been attempting to duplicate your platform's architecture for 18 months. My sources at Pinnacle say their version has failed 3 compliance tests already, which explains the heightened hostility, Nia observed, watching Avery retreat across the lounge. She's under pressure to deliver results. Pressure creates 2 outcomes, Victor remarked. Diamonds or dust. You became the former. She fears becoming the latter. Boarding began 30 minutes later. Nia settled into seat 2A, arranging her materials for one final review before landing. The presentation deck, implementation timeline, and financial projections represented thousands of hours of work by her team. More importantly, they embodied a vision of financial inclusion that her parents had instilled in her decades earlier. Victor sat behind her in 3C, immediately engaging in quiet conversation with another investor. Across the aisle in 2B, Avery Sinclair pointedly focused on her laptop. Though Nia noticed her glancing at the CalPay logo on Nia's tablet case, as the remaining first-class passengers boarded, Nia recognized several faces: tech journalists, venture capitalists, and even the chief innovation officer from a competing financial platform. The Sun Valley Conference had become the industry's premier gathering, and this flight carried many of its influential attendees. The significance wasn't lost on Nia. 8 years ago, she'd flown economy to her first pitch meeting, rehearsing her presentation while squeezed between strangers. Now she sat in first class, not as a supplicant seeking approval, but as a CEO whose company was reshaping financial access for millions. She opened her presentation one last time, reviewing the impact statistics that meant the most to her. 78% of CalPay users had been previously rejected by traditional banks. Small businesses using their platform reported 34% higher approval rates for growth capital. Average user savings increased by $200 annually through reduced fees and predatory loan avoidance. The cabin door closed. Safety demonstrations began. In less than 5 hours, Nia would stand on stage before the industry's most influential figures, announcing how CalPay planned to expand these successes globally. What no one on the plane realized, not Victor with his strategic brilliance, not Avery with her competitive hostility, not even Nia herself, was that the true test of her leadership wouldn't come during tomorrow's presentation. It would unfold in the next few minutes, challenging not just her company's future, but the fundamental question of who deserves respect in spaces designed to exclude. The seatbelt sign illuminated with a soft chime. The aircraft pushed back from the gate, and Elliot, the flight attendant who would soon upend everything, began his first-class cabin check. Ladies and gentlemen, we're currently number 4 for takeoff. Flight attendants, prepare for departure. The captain's announcement hummed through the cabin as Nia reviewed her presentation notes. Her fingers brushed against the smooth glass of her tablet screen, muscle memory guiding her through slides she'd refined countless times. Elliot appeared beside her seat, his shadow falling across her work. "Excuse me," he said, voice pitched low, but audible to nearby passengers. "There seems to be a seating discrepancy I need to address." Nia looked up, maintaining her professional demeanor despite the interruption. "I believe we already settled this. My boarding pass confirms seat 2A. Elliot's lips tightened. Our manifest shows another passenger assigned to this seat. I need to see your boarding pass again." The businessman across the aisle, mid-50s, with salt and pepper hair and a Wall Street Journal folded on his tray, glanced over with undisguised interest. Nia unlocked her phone and displayed the digital boarding pass. "As you can see, seat 2A, first class, confirmed." Elliot scrutinized the screen longer than necessary. "This could be an error in the system. I'll need to verify with the gate." "We've already pushed back," Nia pointed out, "and I've been seated here since pre-boarding began 40 minutes ago." "Nevertheless," Elliot insisted, "protocol requires verification." From seat 3C, Victor Mensah leaned forward. "Young man, is there a problem?" "Dr. Caldwell is a frequent first-class passenger with this airline." Elliot barely acknowledged Victor. "Sir, I'm handling this matter." The dismissal was subtle but unmistakable. A quiet tension descended across the first-class cabin. Avery Sinclair observed from across the aisle, her expression a carefully controlled blend of detachment and interest. "I'd like to speak with the lead flight attendant," Nia requested, her tone firm but measured. "Marcia is busy with pre-flight duties," Elliot replied. "For now, I need you to gather your belongings and move to the main cabin until we can sort this out." The air conditioning vent above Nia's seat blew cold against her neck. She felt a familiar weight settling in her chest, the weight of having to justify her presence in spaces where her legitimacy was questioned simply because of how she looked. "I will not be moving," Nia stated clearly. "I purchased this seat. I was assigned this seat. I am sitting in this seat. If there's a system error, that's for the airline to resolve without disrupting my flight." Elliot's posture stiffened. "Ma'am, compliance with crew member instructions is required by federal regulations, and discrimination against passengers is prohibited by those same regulations," Nia countered. "I'm not being disruptive or non-compliant. I'm sitting in my assigned seat." The businessman across the aisle cleared his throat. "Excuse me, but I've been watching this interaction, and I don't understand the issue. The lady has shown you her boarding pass twice." "Sir, this doesn't concern you," Elliot replied tersely. "Actually," the man continued, "as a Diamond Medallion member for 15 years, I'm concerned about how passengers are being treated." Elliot's face flushed. He turned and walked briskly toward the front galley. Nia exhaled slowly, aware of the eyes now watching her from surrounding seats. She felt the familiar calculus running through her mind, the one that had governed countless professional interactions. Should she assert her rights more forcefully and risk being labeled angry and aggressive, or maintain composed dignity at the cost of potential mistreatment? 3 minutes later, Elliot returned with Marcia and a man in a pilot's uniform. "Dr. Caldwell," Marcia began, her expression professionally neutral but eyes conveying concern. "I understand there's a seating question." "There's no question about my seating," Nia replied. "I'm in my assigned seat, which I've verified twice now." The man in the pilot uniform, First Officer Jenkins according to his nameplate, spoke next. "Ma'am, our ground team is reporting a duplicate seating assignment. For security reasons, we need to resolve this before takeoff." "Then resolve it," Nia responded. "But I fail to see why resolution requires me to move when I've been properly seated for nearly an hour." Elliot interjected. "She's being uncooperative." "I'm being reasonable," Nia corrected, maintaining eye contact with the first officer. "And I'm requesting reasonable treatment." First Officer Jenkins glanced between Nia and Elliot. "Ma'am, I understand your frustration, but we need to follow procedure." "What procedure specifically requires removing a seated passenger with a valid boarding pass?" Victor asked, standing now. "I'd like the exact protocol referenced, please." The first officer shifted uncomfortably. "Sir, please remain seated while we address this situation." "I'm addressing it as well," Victor replied. "As a global board member of the International Air Transport Association, I'm quite familiar with passenger rights. Dr. Caldwell has shown her boarding pass. The aircraft door is closed. No other passenger is claiming this seat. What precisely is the security concern?" A tense silence followed. Marcia glanced at her colleague with barely concealed frustration. "Elliot," she said quietly, "let me see the manifest again." Elliot hesitated before handing her his tablet. Marcia reviewed it, frowning slightly. "There's no duplicate assignment showing in the system now." "It was there earlier," Elliot insisted. "And regulations state that any security anomaly must be investigated," Marcia completed. "Yes, but the system shows Dr. Caldwell correctly assigned to 2A. First Officer Jenkins nodded. "Then we appear to be resolved. Dr. Caldwell, thank you for your patience." As they turned to leave, Elliot remained rooted in place. "Sir, with respect, the initial alert requires further verification. We should contact ground security." The first officer paused. "Is there additional information I'm not aware of?" Elliot lowered his voice, though not enough to prevent nearby passengers from hearing. "The boarding pass could have been altered. We've had incidents of upgraded seat fraud recently." The implication hung in the air like smoke. Nia felt heat rising in her cheeks. "Are you suggesting I fabricated my boarding pass?" she asked directly. "Based on what evidence?" Elliot avoided her gaze. "I'm following security protocols." "No," Nia stated firmly. "You're making assumptions about who belongs in first class." The cabin fell silent. Even the ambient sounds of preparation for takeoff seemed to dim. First officer. Jenkins cleared his throat. Let's continue this conversation in the galley. There's nothing to continue, Nia replied. I've complied with every reasonable request. I've shown my documentation twice. I'm sitting in my assigned seat. The manifest confirms it. What remains unclear? The first officer hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with the escalating situation. Ma'am, Dr. Caldwell, Nia corrected. Dr. Caldwell, he amended. Please come with us to discuss this privately. I decline, Nia replied. Any discussion about my seating can happen right here. Elliot's patience visibly snapped. This is becoming a security issue. Either you comply voluntarily, or we'll need to take further steps. Victor stood again. What further steps? Are you threatening a passenger who has done nothing wrong? Sir, remain seated. Elliot demanded. The atmosphere in the cabin crackled with tension. Other passengers began shifting in their seats, murmuring to one another. First Officer Jenkins made a decision. I'm calling the captain. He disappeared toward the cockpit. Marcia remained, her professional mask slipping to reveal genuine concern. Dr. Caldwell, she said quietly. I apologize for this situation. Before Nia could respond, the captain emerged from the cockpit, a tall man with graying temples and the rigid posture of former military. What's the issue? He asked tersely. Elliot stepped forward. Passenger refused to comply with verification procedures following a manifest discrepancy. The discrepancy has been resolved, Marcia interjected. The system shows Dr. Caldwell correctly assigned to this seat. The captain surveyed the situation, eyes moving from Nia to Elliot to the increasingly restless passengers. We're delayed for takeoff now, he stated flatly. This needs immediate resolution. I agree, Nia replied. And resolution means acknowledging that I'm in my correct seat and continuing with our departure. The captain's expression hardened. Dr. Caldwell, I'm responsible for this aircraft and everyone on it. My flight attendant has raised a security concern, and I'm obligated to address it. What specific security concern? Nia pressed. My identity, my documentation, or simply my presence in first class? The captain turned to Elliot. Call ground. Security. Those three words transformed the atmosphere entirely. Across the aisle, the businessman stood up. Captain, this is completely unnecessary. I've witnessed this entire interaction. Sir, sit down, the captain ordered. I will not. The man replied. This is discriminatory treatment, and I'm prepared to document it as such. The captain ignored him, addressing Nia directly. You have one final opportunity to comply voluntarily. Nia met his gaze steadily. I am in my assigned seat with a valid ticket. I have broken no rules. I will not be moved. The next 5 minutes unfolded with nightmarish clarity. 2 security officers boarded the plane. Despite protests from multiple passengers, they approached Nia's seat. Ma'am, you need to come with us, the first officer stated. On what grounds? Nia demanded. Non-compliance with crew instructions, came the robotic response. When Nia remained seated, they moved to physically remove her. One officer gripped her left arm while the other reached for her right. The pressure of their fingers dug into her skin through her silk blouse. Take your hands off me, Nia stated, voice cutting through the cabin. Victor moved into the aisle. This is assault. You cannot manhandle a passenger. The officers ignored him, physically lifting Nia from her seat. Her tablet crashed to the floor, the screen shattering on impact. Her CEO credentials swung wildly from her neck as they forced her to her feet. I can walk myself, Nia stated with dignity, though they maintained their grip on her arms that they began moving her toward the exit. The cabin erupted. This is outrageous, shouted a woman in the third row. I'm recording this entire incident, called a young man, phone held high. The businessman who had defended Nia earlier stepped into the aisle, blocking their path. I'm Lewis Harrington, General Counsel for Goldman Sachs. What you're doing is illegal, and I'm witnessing it. The security officers hesitated, suddenly aware of the hostility surrounding them. Avery Sinclair remained seated, her expression unreadable as she watched the scene unfold. For a brief moment, her eyes met Nia's, and something unexpected flickered. Across her face, recognition? Shame? Whatever it was vanished quickly behind her professional mask. Nia was forced down the aisle. A remarkable thing happened. Passengers began to stand. First a few, then dozens. Phones emerged, recording the incident from multiple angles. Voices rose in protest. Let her go. This is discrimination. She showed her boarding pass. The last thing Nia saw before being removed from the aircraft was Victor Mensa addressing the remaining first-class passengers, his powerful voice carrying clearly. Will we sit quietly while this happens? Or will we stand for justice? The answer to his question would soon empty an entire aircraft and launch a social media firestorm that no airline public relations team could possibly contain. The jetway felt unnaturally cold as security officers escorted Nia from the aircraft, their grip still firm on her arms. Through the small windows, Atlanta's morning sun cast harsh rectangles of light across the industrial carpet. Nearby gate, agents stared with unconcealed curiosity as a black woman in a designer suit, clearly not the typical disruptive passenger, was marched toward the terminal. I want your badge numbers, Nia stated, her voice steady despite the humiliation burning through her. And I want the names of every person involved in this decision. The first officer tightened his grip slightly. Ma'am, you need to calm down. I am perfectly calm, Nia replied. And I am perfectly aware of my rights, which are being violated with every step you take. Inside the aircraft, a different kind of storm was forming. Victor Mensa stood in the first-class aisle, his imposing frame blocking any attempt to resume normal service. The overhead lights reflected off his silver-rimmed glasses as he addressed the surrounding passengers, his voice carrying the measured authority that had influenced boardrooms across 3 continents. What we just witnessed, he began, was not a security procedure. It was discrimination, plain and simple. A distinguished executive with the correct documentation was physically removed from her rightful seat. Marcia, the lead flight attendant, stepped forward. Sir, please return to your seat. We need to prepare for departure. There will be no departure, Victor replied firmly. Not until Dr. Caldwell is returned to her seat with a full apology. The businessman who had identified himself as Lewis Harrington nodded in agreement. I concur. As an attorney, what I witnessed constitutes clear discriminatory treatment. Across the aisle, Avery Sinclair remained seated, her knuckles white as she gripped her armrest. The competitive fire that had fueled her campaign against CalPay seemed suddenly extinguished, replaced by the uncomfortable recognition of watching privilege enforced too nakedly. This doesn't concern you, the captain stated, having returned to the cabin. We've addressed a security matter according to protocol. What security matter? Demanded a woman in the 4th row, middle-aged, South Asian, wearing a Yale medical school sweatshirt. I watched everything. She showed her boarding pass twice. Ma'am, the captain replied tersely, you don't have all the information. Then provide it, Victor challenged. Explain to everyone here what security threat Dr. Caldwell posed. The captain's jaw tightened. I'm not obligated to explain security decisions to passengers. Then I'm not obligated to remain on this aircraft, Victor declared. He reached for his carry-on bag. I will not fly with an airline that treats passengers this way. Lewis Harrington stood as well. I'm leaving too. And I'll be filing a formal complaint with the DOT. The captain's expression darkened. Sit down, both of you. Interfering with flight crew duties is a federal offense. So is discrimination, Victor replied evenly. I'll take my chances in court. From the middle of first class, another voice joined the fray, a younger white woman with a tech company logo on her laptop. I have the whole incident on video. It's already uploading to the cloud. The atmosphere shifted perceptibly. What had been a confrontation between a few passengers and the crew was transforming into something larger. Phones throughout the cabin recorded every word, every reaction. Anyone else who wishes to deplane needs to do so now, the captain announced. Attempting to regain control. We have a departure slot to maintain. I'm leaving, declared the South Asian woman, standing firmly. And I'm a million-mile flyer with this airline. One by one, passengers throughout first class began to stand. The movement spread visibly, like dominoes falling in sequence. A gray-haired couple in row 5. A young black executive in row 6. 3 business travelers who had been quietly working on laptops. The captain exchanged glances with Marcia, whose professional composure was cracking under the weight of what was unfolding. This is highly irregular, the captain muttered. What's irregular? Victor replied, loud enough for everyone to hear, is removing a passenger who did nothing wrong. The revolt spread beyond first class. As word traveled through the cabin about what had occurred, main cabin passengers began to stir. A college student in row 12 stood up. If she goes, I go too. He called out. A flight attendant rushed over. Sir, please stay seated. No, he replied firmly. I saw what happened. This isn't right. The cabin buzzed with conversation, passengers conferring with seatmates, sharing details of the incident that had spread from first class. More people stood. More bags were retrieved from overhead bins. The captain disappeared into the cockpit, presumably to contact operations about the deteriorating situation. Elliot remained near the galley, his earlier confidence replaced by growing alarm as the passenger rebellion expanded. Victor moved through the first-class cabin methodically, speaking to each passenger, his voice low but intent. This is larger than one incident. This is about who we are as people. Will we watch silently, or will we act? In row 2, Avery Sinclair finally stood, gathering her belongings with mechanical precision. When Victor approached her, she spoke without meeting his eyes. This wasn't supposed to happen like this. Victor's gaze was penetrating. How was it supposed to happen, Miss Sinclair? She didn't answer, continuing to pack her designer bag with deliberate movements. Near the back of the plane, a flight attendant tried desperately to maintain order. Everyone, please. The captain has informed me that deplaning now will result in significant delays for your journey. Better delayed than complicit, shouted someone from the middle rows. The rebellion had gained unstoppable momentum. What began as individual decisions transformed into collective action. Passengers who moments earlier had been strangers united in purpose. This is how change happens, Victor declared, addressing the entire cabin now. Not through grand gestures, but through ordinary people refusing to accept injustice. Outside on the jetway, Nia found herself seated in a small holding area, a female customer service manager attempting to smooth over the situation. Dr. Caldwell, I want to assure you that the airline takes these matters very seriously, the woman explained, her corporate training evident in every measured word. There appears to have been a miscommunication regarding. This wasn't a miscommunication, Nia interrupted. This was profiling. I was in my assigned seat with proper documentation. We're investigating the circumstances, the manager continued. In the meantime, we'd be happy to rebook you on the next available flight to San Francisco with a complimentary upgrade to first class. Nia's laugh held no humor. You think this is about a seat upgrade? This is about dignity. This is about being treated as a human being deserving of respect. Before the manager could respond, her radio crackled with an urgent message. We have a situation. Multiple passengers are deplaning in protest. Request additional personnel at gate 27 immediately. The manager's professional mask slipped momentarily, revealing genuine alarm. She stepped away to respond to the call, leaving Nia alone with the security officers, who exchanged uncomfortable glances. Minutes later, the jetway door opened again. Victor Mensah emerged, followed by Lewis Harrington and a stream of passengers. Victor's face brightened upon seeing Nia. There she is, he called out, quickening his pace. The security officers tensed, but it was too late to establish any perimeter. Within moments, Nia found herself surrounded by supporters, first-class passengers who had witnessed the incident directly, followed by main cabin passengers who had joined the exodus in solidarity. Are you all right? Victor asked, his hand gently touching her shoulder. I'm fine, Nia replied, though the slight tremor in her voice suggested otherwise. What's happening on the plane? Lewis Harrington answered, mass exodus. I'd estimate at least 60% of passengers are deplaning. In protest, the South Asian woman in the Yale sweatshirt approached, extending her hand. Dr. Caldwell, I'm Dr. Priya Sharma. What happened to you is unconscionable. I've already contacted 3 news outlets. The terminal grew increasingly crowded as more passengers emerged from the jetway. Airport staff scrambled to manage the unexpected influx, setting up impromptu waiting areas and dispatching customer service representatives. Nia observed the scene with a mixture of amazement and gratitude. These strangers, people from different backgrounds, different walks of life, had disrupted their own travel plans to stand with her. In that moment, The weight of isolation that had accompanied so many professional battles lifted slightly. 15 minutes into the exodus, a distinguished-looking man in his 60s approached Nia directly. He introduced himself as Edward Thornton, the airline's regional director of operations. Dr. Caldwell, he began, his tone carefully calibrated between authority and contrition. I've been briefed on the situation. I want to personally apologize for your experience today. Nia regarded him steadily. Mr. Thornton, I appreciate your apology, but this isn't about me alone. This is about a pattern of treatment that affects countless travelers who look like me. Thornton nodded, glancing nervously at the growing crowd and the phones recording his every word. We take these matters extremely seriously. I assure you, there will be a full investigation. Investigation implies uncertainty, Victor interjected. There is no uncertainty here. Dozens witnessed discrimination in action. Lewis Harrington stepped forward, business card extended. The airline should be prepared for a class action lawsuit. I've already collected statements from 17 passengers. Thornton's professional demeanor wavered. Perhaps we could discuss this somewhere more private. No, Nia replied firmly. Privacy serves your interests, not justice. Whatever you have to say can be said right here. The crowd had grown to well over 100 people. Gate agents whispered urgently into phones. Nearby travelers paused to observe the unusual gathering. In the modern airport terminal, with its carefully managed flows and processes, a spontaneous assembly of this size represented a significant disruption. The flight has been canceled, Thornton finally announced. All passengers will be rebooked. On later flights today, a cheer erupted from the assembled protesters. And, Thornton continued, clearly struggling to regain control of the situation. Dr. Caldwell, we would like to offer you our sincere apologies and compensation for your experience. I don't want compensation, Nia stated clearly. I want accountability. I want the employees involved to receive proper training. I want policy changes that prevent this from happening to anyone else. A young man near the front of the crowd called out. My TikTok of what happened already has 15,000 views. This is going viral. Thornton paled visibly. The airline's carefully maintained public image was unraveling in real-time broadcast. Across social media platforms where no PR team could contain it.in that moment, Avery Sinclair emerged from the jetway, wheeling her designer luggage. She paused at the periphery of the crowd, watching the confrontation between Nia and the airline executive. For a fleeting moment, their eyes met across the terminal. Avery gave an almost imperceptible nod, acknowledgement, perhaps even respect, before turning away. Dr. Priya Sharma stepped forward, addressing Thornton directly. We don't want vague promises. We want specific commitments. When will the training begin? Who will conduct it? How will outcomes be measured? The questions came rapid fire, each one highlighting the inadequacy of corporate platitudes in the face of determined, educated advocates. Thornton glanced at his watch, then at the growing media presence as airport staff escorted journalists toward the gathering. I propose we establish a working group to address these concerns immediately. Dr. Caldwell, if you and a few representatives would join me. That's not how this works, Victor interrupted. You don't get to select which voices you hear. Everyone here deserves answers. As if to underscore his point, the crowd began to chant. Justice. Accountability. Change. The simple, rhythmic words echoed through the terminal, drawing more attention, more phones, more witnesses. What had begun as one woman being removed from her rightful seat had transformed into a movement, spontaneous, passionate, and impossible to ignore. In that crystalline moment, standing amid a sea of supporters who hours earlier had been strangers, Nia realized that the power had shifted. The airline, with its protocols and hierarchies, found itself defenseless against the most basic human impulse, the drive to stand together against injustice. The revolution wasn't happening on social media. It was happening right here, in person, one passenger at a time. 48 hours after the incident, Nia Caldwell sat in the presidential suite of San Francisco's Fairmont Hotel, surrounded by her executive team. News channels played on mute across 3 different screens, each showing footage of her removal from the plane. The hashtag first class while black had accumulated over 7 million mentions. Interview requests flooded her inbox. CNN, MSNBC, Bloomberg, Forbes, even 60 minutes. The airline CEO called again. Zoe reported, setting down her phone. That's his fifth attempt today. Nia nodded, her focus remaining on the presentation she'd deliver tomorrow, a presentation that had transformed overnight from a standard investor pitch into something far more significant. Legal update, continued Zoe. Lewis Harrington has assembled a pro bono team from 3 major firms. They've already collected sworn statements from 87 passengers. And Victor? Nia asked, finishing his CNN interview. He'll be here within the hour. Outside the hotel, journalists gathered. In anticipation, the story had captured national attention not just for the incident itself, but for the extraordinary response. An entire plane emptying in protest, passengers from different backgrounds uniting against injustice in real time. The airline's initial statement had only fueled public outrage. We are investigating an incident involving a passenger who did not comply with crew instructions. Video evidence quickly dismantled this narrative, forcing a second statement acknowledging serious concerns about the handling of the situation and placing several employees on administrative leave. By evening, Nia's phone buzzed with a text. From an unknown number, Dr. Caldwell, this is Warren Mitchell, CEO of Pinnacle Financial. What happened to you is inexcusable. I'd welcome the opportunity to discuss how we might work together to address these industry-wide issues. Nia showed the message to Zoe, who raised an eyebrow. Interesting timing, considering their competitive stance against us. Crisis reveals. Character, Nia replied. Let's see if his interest extends beyond this news cycle. The Sun Valley Conference organizers had already adjusted their schedule, allocating Nia a keynote slot rather than her originally planned breakout session. Her presentation, once focused narrowly on CalPay's technical innovations, now incorporated broader themes of inclusion, bias, and systemic change within financial services. Victor arrived shortly after 8, his normally immaculate suit slightly rumpled from a day of media appearances. You've become the face of something much larger than yourself, he said, embracing Nia briefly. How are you holding up? I'm processing, she admitted. One moment I was reviewing quarterly projections, the next I'm at the center of a national conversation about race and privilege. A conversation long overdue, Victor noted. The airline's lawyers contacted me directly. They're proposing mediation rather than litigation. Nia's expression hardened. They want a confidential settlement. Quick, quiet, contained. Precisely. Standard corporate damage control. Not this time, Nia decided. Any resolution must include structural changes, not just financial compensation. The next morning, as Nia prepared for her keynote address, breaking news flashed across hotel televisions. The airline's board had called an emergency meeting. By noon, they announced the CEO would step aside temporarily, while a comprehensive review of passenger treatment policies took place. Nia took the stage at exactly 2 p.m., wearing a cobalt blue suit that stood out against the conference's neutral backdrop. The auditorium overflowed, with attendees lining the walls and sitting in aisles. Camera flashes punctuated the hushed anticipation. 3 days ago, she began, her voice steady and measured. I boarded a flight in seat 2A. Today, I stand before you not just as the CEO of CalPay, but as someone whose experience highlights why our mission matters more than ever. For the next 30 minutes, Nia wove together CalPay's financial innovations with broader themes of access, dignity, and systemic change. The audience, predominantly white, predominantly male, predominantly privileged, listened with unprecedented attention. Financial systems, like air travel, operate on unspoken rules about who belongs where, she explained. The algorithms that determine who gets credit, who receives service, who sits in which cabin. These aren't neutral mathematical formulas. They reflect the biases of their creators. In the front row, Warren Mitchell of Pinnacle Financial nodded along, his expression thoughtful rather than competitive. Beside him sat Avery Sinclair, her usual shield of hostility notably absent. Nia concluded with an unexpected announcement. Today, CalPay is launching an industry accountability initiative. We're creating transparent metrics for financial inclusion, measuring who gets served and who gets excluded. We invite every institution represented in this room to join us, not as a public relations exercise, but as a fundamental reimagining of who finance serves. The standing ovation lasted nearly 3 minutes. Backstage, Victor awaited with news. The airline just released a formal statement. They've terminated the flight attendant and captain involved. More importantly, they're implementing mandatory bias training for all customer-facing staff and revising their passenger verification procedures. That's a start, Neo acknowledged. But real change requires more than reactive measures. 7 days later, the airline's board chair and new interim CEO requested a meeting with Nia at CalPay's headquarters. The resulting 2-hour discussion yielded substantial commitments: an external advisory council on inclusion practices, quarterly public reporting on passenger complaint demographics, revised training for all employees, and financial support for STEM education in underserved communities. The settlement included no confidentiality clause, a significant departure from corporate standard practice. Instead, the agreement was published in full, establishing a new benchmark for corporate accountability. Legal experts called it unprecedented. Business schools quickly developed case studies examining how passenger solidarity had forced corporate change. Transportation industry publications highlighted the incident as a watershed moment in customer relations. For Nia personally, the aftermath brought both challenges and opportunities. Death threats arrived alongside speaking invitations. Conservative commentators questioned her motives, while Fortune named her Business Leader of the Year. Through it all, she maintained the same clarity of purpose that had guided CalPay from its garage apartment beginnings. 3 months after the incident, CalPay's Series D funding closed at $230 million, $50 million more than initially targeted. Investors cited not just the company's technical innovations, but Nia's leadership during the airline controversy as key factors in their decision. Even more significant were the partnership offers. Banks that had previously dismissed CalPay's inclusion-focused approach now sought collaboration. Government agencies requested consultation on financial access policies. Universities invited Nia to help reshape their business ethics curricula. On a clear Tuesday morning, exactly 100 days after the incident, Nia boarded another flight to San Francisco. This time, a different airline had upgraded her to first class without request. As she settled into her seat, the lead flight attendant approached. "Dr. Caldwell," she said quietly, "I just wanted to thank you. My daughter's studying finance because of you. What you did changed things for all of us." Nia smiled, recognizing something profound in this simple interaction. The incident had forced a reckoning not just for one airline, but for institutions across industries, a reminder that true change often begins with one person refusing to accept injustice, amplified by others brave enough to stand alongside them. Later that week, Nia received an unexpected email from Avery Sinclair. "I've accepted a position leading Pinnacle's new financial inclusion division. Our first initiative focuses on algorithmic bias in lending decisions. I'd welcome your input, not as competitors, but as potential collaborators." The industry transformation continued, extending beyond symbolic gestures to structural reforms. New benchmarks for diversity in leadership, transparent reporting on service demographics, and revised training programs rolled out across the financial sector. When asked in interviews about her legacy, Nia consistently redirected attention from herself to the broader movement. What happened on that plane wasn't about one person being mistreated. It was about everyday people choosing to stand together against injustice. That's the true power, not in my story, but in their collective action. The most meaningful outcome wasn't measured in funding rounds or media appearances, but in the quiet revolution happening across boardrooms, airport terminals, and bank lobbies nationwide. Spaces where the unspoken rules about who belongs were finally being named, challenged, and rewritten. 1 year after the incident that emptied an entire aircraft, the ripples of change continued to spread across industries far beyond aviation. Dr. Nia Caldwell's quarterly accountability index now tracked inclusion metrics across Fortune 500 companies, with participation growing from 12 initial signatories to over 300. Corporate boards nationwide adopted new evaluation standards for executive behavior during crisis moments. Flight attendant training programs incorporated case studies examining the intersection of authority, bias, and customer dignity. Most significantly, ordinary travelers became more willing to speak up when witnessing discrimination. Documented instances of passenger solidarity increased 340% year-over-year, creating a powerful deterrent against biased treatment in public spaces. At Calpay's new headquarters, a simple framed photo hung in the lobby. Passengers of diverse backgrounds, standing together in an airport terminal, their impromptu alliance a reminder that systems change when people refuse to accept injustice. The power was never in my title or position, Nia often reflected during mentoring sessions with young entrepreneurs. The true transformation came when strangers recognized each other's humanity and stood together. That's how we reshape the world, not alone, but in unity.